Yeah, we got some new videos up there just recently, so there's some good ones on there. And I will say that, you know, the recordings that you get off of Zoom are definitely better than our little camcorder in the banquet hall.
Yeah,
That's a good best practice to share. I'll take that back to the board.
Yeah.
I made myself a note. I'll go share some of those too.
Yeah, Rosa's presentation's posted up there.
Oh, cool. She knows that, right?
I believe so, yeah.
I know I told her I'd let her know when it went up. I didn't do that. So hopefully somebody else did.
Cherise, your background is back. We didn't see it at bingo.
I know, I always forget to turn it on.
Yeah, but she had a kid with her at bingo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Midget was here.
Is that really her name?
No, I call her Mini Me. Her name is Kenna.
Kenna, cool.
When I first met you at the July, or I think it was in June last year at the CVCSI meetings, you had that same background and I was really confused because I couldn't tell what it was. But now it's just so fitting to you with like the tentacles coming up. That sounded mean, but you're the CSI Kraken, so it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I had to explain that one to Kenna as well. It's just like not getting the whole octopus thing. See some familiar faces jumping on here.
Hey, Marty.
You're muted.
You're muted. Good thing I can read lips. Hey.
Is he swearing again over there?
You might be.
Heck no.
Heck.
So unlike me, Cherise. Right?
Oh, you would never do anything like that.
My daughter and I have been practicing how to freeze online. So you go like when you're like out being asked something bad, right? That you can't answer, you just freeze.
I'm going to use that.
The best
They
one is
need
still,
a button.
the best one is still Allie. Like she froze once when she was drinking red wine, like in the middle, like here, right? And
Yep, I was frozen.
it stayed
Was the wine glass getting more and more empty? That was your giveaway.
But it stayed frozen for like 5 minutes. And I'm like, at some point, I'm like, what the heck? Like, how long can you actually drink that?
Weird. I'm interior decorating over here, readjusting a lamp. Can't quite decide how I want it. Struggling, it's fine.
I think we'll give it till about 5 after, and then we'll jump right in for the most time.
So is everyone here in Oregon? On the East Coast or West Coast, I mean?
Michael's not, he's in Florida. I know Jennifer's in Chicago, so we've got some different locations.
And you're in Virginia, right, Caitlin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Asking about those 8 to 10 o'clockers on the East Coast.
No, I'm sorry.
No, it's funny. When I was in Sharice's CDT class, it was, I think, 8 to 10 or something like that. So I've learned to be a night owl.
No, you should just move to Oregon. That's just it.
I know, I should. I should.
Looks like we've got Columbus, Ohio.
Ooh.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Who said that?
Nigel.
Hi.
Hi, Cherise.
Hey, Nigel, how you doing?
Well, how are you? How you been?
It's kind of staying out of trouble.
That is the name of the game, right?
Yeah, well, I don't have a whole lot of choice at the moment.
Yeah.
Ellen's laughing because she knows it's not true.
Ellen?
How was your COVID season since last time I seen you?
Doing the same thing, sitting here in front of this computer. Hopefully not for much longer.
I can dig it.
Oh, it will go on for a while.
Hush up.
Sorry.
Let me live in my delusional little world, Alexander.
Absolutely. Oh,
Some of
man.
the silly things I do to entertain myself are almost scary. Like making the worst cupcakes you've ever seen in your life this week.
Well, how can a cupcake be bad?
Well, if you would have seen it, I'll send you a picture, Alexander.
Please.
Sure.
I mean, did you
Really?
like forget the sugar or something? I mean,
No, they tasted good. They just looked horrendous.
oh,
And I don't bake. If you know me, I don't get along with flour in any way, shape, or form. Hi, Melody.
Hello, I was just about to say hello. I miss your face.
I made your face too. I was going to actually message you today and then I got busy and didn't get it done.
I did the same exact thing. It's
We
like
need to
we're,
chat.
yes, we do.
We need to chat.
We
I
do.
have Melody withdrawals.
We need to make some, we need to remove some of our plans around again, yet again, due to COVID.
That was one of the reasons, besides just seeing your face, I wanted to chat. I kind of suspected that since I haven't heard any other things. So I need to know if I need to be practicing here. Because I have to do it without crying.
So do we need some run-throughs?
Oh, if that's not going to help, I'm still going to cry. I'm just
Multiple rehearsals?
nothing's
fine.
going to help. I cannot attend a wedding and not cry.
I was about to say I cry at every wedding too.
Okay, so you'll understand when I'm
Yes.
slobbering as I have you say your vows.
Tears of joy. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
As long as it's tears of joy, we're good.
But I know how to make you rainbow cupcakes now.
That's right. Ooh, hey.
You saw those cupcakes. Those are not going to be at your wedding.
They were super cute. I
actually
Probably.
I like the cupcakes. If you make our cupcakes, you have to make sure they have the googly eyes on them too.
Yeah, those were great. I like the.
Of
That
course.
was a good entrance, Maddie.
Yes. Well
I've
done.
arrived.
I like Derek's background. That's cool. What are we looking at there?
I'm actually not on a job site, but it is a picture of a job site in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, nice. Very cool.
Which one is it?
About
Can you
another
tell us that?
minute.
Pardon me?
Can you tell us which one it is?
It was a project on 4th and Grant, kind of right by PSU and the 405,
Mm-hmm.
right down there.
Nice. You almost match it. You almost
I
blend in
know.
your little camo.
Should have worn a black shirt. Contrast.
Black, you would have been Halloween themed, right? It would have
I
been great.
know,
Your beanies rocking the.
I
Halloween
know. I gotta hide my COVID haircut.
Oh no.
I love looking at these names and of people who are here and seeing former CDT students.
I was going to ask you that too, because I saw the full list the other day and I was like, I wonder how many of these are in Sharice's class, because I bet it's a lot.
There were, I did see a few.
Are you keeping track? Do you keep up with how many?
I don't.
It was my whole LinkedIn feed
Now?
for a few days.
Exactly.
Sharice, are you teaching your class only once a year then, the study sessions, or do you do it multiple times?
Twice a year. So my
Okay.
next one starts March 3rd is the next round.
Believe
Okay.
those are already up on the Portland CSI event webpage. I will pop that link in the chat.
I have some people that maybe want to sign up then, since it's virtual, you can take it anywhere from anybody. And I have heard fantastic things about your tutelage. So
Oh.
I liked it so much, I might do it again.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I have fun with it. And I think, it's not the most exciting topic on the planet. So if you don't make it a little interesting, I don't know. When I took mine, there were times that I wanted to fall asleep.
Yeah.
So, you try to learn from the things you've learned and do a better job. But we had 62 people in our last class.
Nice. Okay, well, I'll make sure to let them know. Ours starts in a couple of weeks, I guess, and so they would be missing the deadline. So
yeah, I noticed you guys start before we do. The testing period's a little later this spring than it usually is, which is why I decided to start ours a little later. I try to end right before the testing period starts so things are as fresh as possible.
That's probably a good idea.
And it's
and who knows with COVID, you know.
Do you have multiple teachers?
Yeah, we have, so our program chair, Paul, he does quite a bit of it, but we've got a handful of technical folks that go through, a couple of other manufacturers reps. So he just kind of goes through and assigns a few chapters.
I'll shut up, Miranda, because my gut says you probably want to get started.
I'm ready.
Okay.
All useful information though. So, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Miranda Ebelar. I'm a residential sales representative for Mutual Materials Company and a member of Portland CSI. In addition, I chair the Portland CSI Emerging Professionals Committee, along with members Maddie Card, Colchard Stone, and Robbie Peters, who I don't see on quite yet, but I know she'll be here. I'll be moderating the event and discussion this evening. Our Emerging Professionals Committee advocates for AEC professionals with less than 10 years experience in the industry. We work with other Portland CSI committees to make CSI events more emerging professional friendly, as well as plan specific EP events throughout the year. Sometimes we join up with other organizations to create the most value. This specific event is focused on discussing our intergenerational workforce in the building industry. As the baby boomers prepare for retirement, it'll fall on Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z to fill those spots. We're already facing a labor shortage, which has only grown greater in the wake of a current pandemic. And an effective transfer of knowledge is critical in ensuring the younger generations not only survive, but flourish in order to create the greatest retention of employees and talent for the industry. And we're already behind in this arena. Today, I'm happy to introduce a panel of dynamic individuals, both emerging and experienced. They work in the building industry and have graciously volunteered their time, thoughts, and expertise on the subject. We'll start with the emerging side. Caitlin, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Caitlin Morgan. I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I graduated from James Madison University in May of 2020. So that's my background. JMU is my home. But since my sophomore year, I believe, yeah, it was the summer after my sophomore year, I got an internship with the Gaines Group Architects. And so when I got that internship, I mean, I obviously very quickly realized that the workforce is different from what you learn in school. So I kept coming, I worked through the summer at Gaines Group. I worked part-time there during the school year throughout my junior year. Then I was back the next summer. Then I was back the next school year. And then by the time I graduated, I was working with them full-time. So that's where I am now. I'm in Charlottesville, but originally I was in their Harrisonburg office. So it's definitely been a transition, trying to figure out just really what you learn in school versus what you are learning in the workforce and kind of jumping right in. And especially with the pandemic, I was working from home. So I'm back in the office now. I'm really happy to get some hands-on learning, but still missing out on those site visits and client meetings. It's still just like an ongoing learning curve, but it's been an incredible opportunity just to see like how quickly everything has changed and what everything is going to look like in 10 years and 20 years. So yeah, that's kind of where I am now.
Awesome. Jake, do you want to go next?
Just kidding. I'm Jake Lamanna. I guess I'm the self-proclaimed Zennial of the group for the purposes of our discussion today. And it's not actually self-proclaimed, but we'll go into that later. I work for Walsh Construction. I'm a quality assurance manager. I've been doing that for 5 years. Prior to that, I was working in an architecture firm in Portland for 2 years. I worked in an architecture firm in Wyoming for 2 years. And prior to that, I worked in an architecture firm in Georgia for 1 year. So I've got a lot of architectural experience out there. I've got a lot of construction experience now. And by a lot, I know I'm saying 5 years to those of you who are saying a lot. But it's one of those things that people who are new to our industry tend to devalue about themselves as their level of experience. So, and I'm hoping we'll get a chance to talk about that later today.
Awesome. Thanks, Jake. Mike, you are up.
What's up, team? All right, I'm Michael Rosica. I'm a licensed architect in the state of Oregon and in the state of Florida and soon to be New York. Let's see, I moved to Oregon. I moved to Portland right after architecture school, and I worked for Merriman Barnes Architects for about 5 years. During the recession, things slowed down. Ironically, they kept me employed through most of it. Then an amazing opportunity arose for me to become a City of Portland Facilities Capital Improvements Project Manager. And I did that for about 5 years, mostly doing a lot of work for the Portland Police Bureau. I worked on every single building they have there. And then, I got my license when I was at the City of Portland. And by the time I was done with, finally, it took me 13 years to become a licensed architect. I was burned out and I was disgusted with the profession of architecture because no one was actually helping. No one was genuinely helping the next generation of architects succeed. And so I just said, I like to write. It's one of the skills that I have. So I said, I'm going to write a blog called youngarchitect.com. And I just started ranting and raving about the profession of architecture. The blog took off like a rocket. I've written a book. I've spoken all over the United States. I've got a whole program that helps people pass their exams. We have a Young Architect Conference. We sell study materials. We've put out hundreds of podcasts and videos and blog posts. But really the Young Architect mission is to help the next generation of architects succeed. I forgot, I don't know how many years I've been in the industry. I guess I got my first job in architecture when I was like 20 years old, and I'm 41 now. So that's me.
Great things. To introduce our experience side, Charisse, do you want to kick us off?
I like to say seasoned. Well seasoned. Hi, everybody. Shout out to my CDT students just because I have to. My name is Charisse Lakeside. I started in this industry when I was 20. I am the senior spec writer for RDH Building Science, but I've spent most of my career in architecture and about 6 years in MEP engineering. And my very first job before that 20-year-old job in architecture was at a construction company. So I've got kind of a unique lens. I am a fellow in CSI. I teach CDT. I do all kinds of other crazy stuff, speaking and just whatever committee somebody needs me on. I'm passionate about this particular topic because my path in this industry was fairly unconventional, and I would not be sitting here with you guys today doing what I'm doing for a living had it not been for the mentors I had along the way that didn't look at me like I was a stupid 20-year-old female in the 80s, where they treated every 20-year-old female like an idiot. And they taught me anything I wanted to know. And I feel like when you're given a gift like that, you need to give back. And so that's why I'm here. I've worked with Michael and a lot of the people here on this and other things, and hoping we can share things that bring us together today.
Thanks, Sharice. Marty, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name's Marty Houston. I work at Qualified Enclosure Consultants. I'm an Aries, so let's just get rid of the euphemism. I'm not experienced, I'm old, I'm 53. I went to, so my background is as an architect. I went to architecture school at University of Cincinnati, a great place to go to school for a number of different reasons. Among them, you came out with 2 years of experience, which meant that I was able to sit for my license exams the summer after I graduated. The other cool thing is you got to go and work with different size companies doing different types of work in different parts of the country. So you learned where you wanted to live, what you wanted to do, the kind of size of company that you wanted to work with. Came out to Portland in '92, worked for an architecture firm for about 1.5 years. It was actually the firm that's owned by the guy who started Hood to Coast. He was already having too much fun with Hood to Coast by the time I got there. Opened up a design build business for about 6 or 7 years and started off doing residential additions and remodels, and ended up going all the way up to kind of commercial work. Finished some licensing requirements at FFA for about 1.5 years in the late '90s. Opened up my own office, did that for about 7 years, and up until, let's see, 2006 to 2020, I was working at Walsh Construction. Had the distinct pleasure of working with Jake for a number of years. That was pretty cool. And I've been at this gig. It's my own company with 2 buddies doing enclosure consulting. I think that one of the things that, Therese, you said is really important, and I'd say it's the same thing for me, is that I had an exceptionally unconventional path, I think. And certainly for the architects in the room, like you, I never sat there and dreamed of being an enclosure consultant as I was going through architecture school. Not for me. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks, Marty. Alexander, our current Portland CSI president, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, Miranda. So first of all, thank you for inviting me. It's a great honor to be here. About me, I was born in South America. I lived the first 8 years in Peru, and we moved to Germany, where eventually I study business. I go to the army. I hate business. I want to be an architect. So fairly late, I enter architecture school. I moved to Berlin because I didn't want to have anything to do with anybody. And the year after I moved there, the wall came down and the opposite happened. Everybody came to Berlin, so yay. And but it was a great time. I got my master's there. I came over to New Mexico because I was curious about the desert, and I got a scholarship. And so I got another master's at UNM, which I really enjoyed. I met my wife there. And then with a short stint back in Germany, we eventually landed in Portland, Oregon. And interestingly enough, we decided between Chicago, Baltimore, and Portland. And for some reason, the Portland Business Bureau were the ones that send us the most information. We're like, okay, we know great stuff about the city, let's go. So nobody had ever been here. And now we've been living here for quite a while, since '97. I've been in the profession since 1989, first with my business background to finance my studies, and then as an architect until, as a full architect until around 2008, when I was offered the position as the spec writer at Tom Hacker, where I worked for 14 years. And I'm like, yeah, sure, I like all of architecture. And because I was the only one who was interested in CSI within a year, I was the spec writer, but that's good. because I like knowledge, and I've been doing it ever since. I insist on doing project work and architecture work because I think it's sort of like it is what I do, and it is what I enjoy, and they sort of like influence each other, and I'm still loving it.
Thanks, Alexander, and thank you to the entire panel for being here tonight. We really appreciate your time and your thoughts and opinions on the subject. Before we jump right into questions, we're going to run a quick poll just on the number of years you've been in the industry yourself, and then we're going to ask that everyone not on the panel, please turn off your cameras so that we can focus on the speakers throughout the night. And then here in just a second, we'll start. Awesome. So just so you guys are aware, we've got about 41% of people have been in the industry for 1 to 10 years, 13% 10 to 20 years, 36% for 20 to 30 years, and 10% for 30 to 40 years. And to start with our questions, Charisse, I'm going to pick on you first. Like you said, I know you're super passionate about the subject. What has been the biggest change you've noticed in the generational diversity of the building industry since you began your career?
The biggest change since I began my career? Okay, that doesn't match the questions you sent us. So now I'm answering on the fly. In the building industry, the biggest change, honest to God, my first architectural office I walked into had one Tandy computer from Radio Shack sitting on a desk that you could do almost nothing with. And, you know, if I had to do a change order, I had to do it in triplicate with carbon paper. And that makes me sound like I'm 90 freaking years old. The biggest change that I think has happened in the industry is technology since I. Is there something else I'm supposed to say? Was that
change in generational diversity?
Oh, well, that's an easy one. You know, there's 75 million baby boomers. I am at the oldest end of Gen X, and there's about 40 or 45 million in Gen X. And there's 75 million millennials and 75 million, what's behind millennials? Gen Z?
Yep.
Behind them. The biggest change in the makeup, in the generational diversity, which is hitting really hard right now, is that imbalance between Gen X and the boomers, and then this huge group of younger professionals. And the biggest change, and it's happening now, is we cannot work with our younger professionals the way they worked with me, or the way that the boomers were brought up in the industry. None of that applies anymore. But yet we're so resistant to change in this industry that apparently it's taking a 2x4 upside the head for the people in this industry to figure that out. And we have to address this, which is why we need to have this conversation today and need to be screaming it from the rooftops.
Thank you. And one more thing I forgot to mention, for anyone who has any questions throughout the event, type them in the chat box and we will have a Q&A portion at the end of the event. If you'd like to ask a question of a specific panel member, just throw their name somewhere in that and we'll be sure to address them directly at the end. So to continue, Michael, I know you work pretty closely with a lot of young professionals. How do you predict that generational diversity will continue to change over the next 5 to 10 to 15 years?
Yeah. Can I start by answering Sharice's question?
Yeah.
One of the biggest changes I think that I've seen is the first thing that popped in my head, and no disrespect to anyone, but for my personal opinion, I think the younger people in the profession are so much funnier than the older people. They have such a bigger sense of humor. And I think part of the reason why it's because the way we communicate and how communication is taking place, people are talking across multiple different platforms of social media all day long that are all, touching upon different ways. Technology has played a big part of that. Now we're, video conferencing all over the place. And the way we are communicating, and I think just as a generational difference that, just the young people that I'm connected with and that I work with just don't take themselves so seriously as much as I think, in my opinion, previous generations have. Bringing that right back to the question you asked me, I fast forward that moving forward. There's social media and communication technologies that don't even exist yet that are coming. And I think it's really inspiring. And I think, from my perspective, I see nothing but positives from being hyper connected. And that's one of the things I'm passionate about, is really bringing the community together and getting everyone on the same team, rather than, our professional lives being a constant competition. And when that happens, I feel like a lot of missed opportunities from learning and growing and mentoring. So yeah, that's one of the things I've seen more than ever in the profession, is really the next generation, the future of the industry. It's really mentoring each other and working laterally alongside each other and saying, we're all in this together, and let's get there, and let's lift each other up. I didn't experience that when I was becoming an architect. It was always a competition, and and I see that having a profound positive impact in the direction it's going.
It's really clear how passionate you both are about the subject, so I appreciate that as a younger professional. Marty, this one's for you. Focusing on work styles, what are the biggest differences between older and younger generations' work styles that you've seen in the last decade?
I'm glad you finally fessed up and said older.
Experience, seasoned.
It's an interesting question. So I guess one of the things that I would say is that you get the boomers who, and here's the thing, every generalization or stereotype is a generalization and stereotype. It's not necessarily applicable to everybody, but it helps us, or actually it aids us in being able to, use a taxonomy to kind of group people together. Right? So take everything with just a bit of a grain of salt. And repeat the question, please.
Yes, of course. The biggest differences between work styles. Yeah.
Actually, I really experienced this at Walsh, especially, and I'm in a small group right now. We're all in COVID, so it's kind of hard to evaluate work styles right now. But I remember the point at which I came into the company, and it was 2006, and there were still a lot of the old guard. Some of the original founding members, and a lot of like the PMs and superintendents that have been there forever. And this is a microcosm, mind you. Those old guys were there early, and those old guys went home late. And those old guys came in on a Saturday. And when I say guys, it's because most of those old guys were guys. It's interesting because everybody's kind of always focused on the millennials wanting a more of a balance between work and life. And actually, I think the group that does it better are the Gen Xers. They actually do it. And I think that millennials talk about it a lot. And I think millennials are very vocal about a lot of things. And I think boomers are very vocal about a lot of things. And the other generational difference is that Gen Xers are not very vocal about a lot of things. They're, generally speaking, maybe the one that's helping to lead the team, but they're not the face of the group, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I would say that there's a work ethic there, like how much you want to work. There's also the work-life balance thing. The other thing that I find really, really interesting is what technology has done to kind of how we work together. Boomers and Gen X, they grew up before like cell phones were a thing. I remember my realtor having a cell phone, and I was like, wow, what's that? And the cool thing about that is there were two things. We had to collaborate with people, because otherwise we'd sit in a room alone, right? So we had to go and be with people and develop interpersonal skills, and we had to learn things from other people because, and this is the other part of it, we didn't have this tremendous power in our hand or in our computer where we could get access to all the information that we want, like right now. No, I actually had to go find the boomer who knew that stuff, right? Or go look it up in a book or stuff like that. So there was a more of a need, I think, to collaborate in order to learn and advance your own knowledge base, where I think the younger generations that have like access to technology or totally embedded in technology, it's like really a part of their life. They experience it, and I think a little bit less of a collaborative way than I think older generations did, just because of the technology.
That makes sense. Caitlin, would you agree with Marty, or from your perspective, have you noticed other differences between generational work styles since you've entered the industry?
Well, I think an interesting point he made was about how when, you would have to go to somebody in order to find the answer for something, which I agree with 100%, because now we have cell phones, we have the internet, we have laptops, we have all of these different things and all of this information right at our fingertips. And the thing is, though, I don't think we're always fully taking advantage of that. So I know for myself, I still see myself using this technology to form direct connections with people, because like when I have a phone problem or a technical problem, the first thing I want to do is call customer service. I don't want to send an email to something and get like an automated response. Like, I think it's a general desire to have human contact with somebody. And so even though now, especially with LinkedIn, LinkedIn is kind of like this middle ground where we can still reach out to people and ask these questions, get these answers from a real person, but not have to take the time to always look through a book or wait till that person is back in the office. So I think that is the biggest thing, how we don't always use technology to our advantage, but we are using it to reach out to these people to get our answers, which, like I said, is a nice middle ground that hopefully we stick with so that we can maintain these human connections. Because if we just start relying on the internet and relying on finding things like this, that's when I think we're going to start sliding. So yeah, I hope that answered the question. It was something that he said, and I'm kind of like, oh, I want to mention that.
Yeah, it definitely fits with the instant gratification way of our world today, right? So I hope, like you said, we can maintain that balance between having answers when we need it and still falling back on those who have the experience to back their answers. Jake, how do you think these differences in work styles impact the workspace, either positively or negatively?
Impact the workspace? Okay. I wanted to first respond to somebody else's comment earlier. Since Michael set the tone. I think that the older generation is actually much funnier than the young generation, because they get all my ridiculous references to pop culture references, whereas I can't even relate to half of my own generation anymore. So sorry, Michael, I just had to point that out. I don't know if that says more about me, more about them, or more about all of us, but we'll just say all of us. As far as generational differences impacting the work space or maybe workplace. It's interesting to kind of link back to what Marty and Caitlin were talking about. Using technology, I noticed that there is a certain mental agility that I observed in the early part of last year when we had to pivot to this new way of interacting. And that wasn't just certain generations, but it was some generational, I guess, age groups more than others. But there's definitely, I guess you're going to find in most of my answers, I don't really like the concept of generations because they're just a category. They don't actually exist. They didn't really exist prior to prior to the boomers creating the concept, I guess. There weren't these conversations about generations and how they affected people. It was, there's the young person in the office, young guy, young whatever you want to call it, but there were the young people in the office and the old people in the office, or in the factory or on the farm or wherever you want to say they were working, and they were butting heads because you're inexperienced or you're experienced or you're in the process of getting that experience. And that's kind of the spectrum I see it all fitting into. And in that vein, in the workplace, I see a certain appreciation from experienced generations that understand that gray area, that water cooler moment, that time that's not on your calendar, but you spend going and walking around the office, has huge value, and that you actually solve problems swiftly. You solve problems that you didn't even know you had until you walked around and were just shooting the shit with people. And you find out that through these interactions, I'd say water cooler moments, but at Walsh we call them beer cooler moments. You end up talking about stuff that you don't realize someone else is already suffering through, and you can't just recreate those using email or a cell phone or even Zoom, because it's such a structured environment. I think that's maybe more about our times currently than a generational difference, but there's the nimbleness to be able to adopt new technology does not mean you can just create an analog in that digital world for what was actually happening in the real world. And I think we're going to find, as we found during the last recession, that we lost a whole bunch of people from the industry. Right now, we're going through the same kind of knowledge loss that we're not sharing over the course of a year, 2 years almost. That by the time this is done, people will have forgotten how to make time out of that. Hopefully it'll come right back, and hopefully all those individuals who value it won't retire during these 2 years, which is scary to me because I've actually watched it happen, that people who didn't want to leave the industry have found the excuse they needed in COVID to leave all of a sudden. And now that information is gone. Anything they could have shared with me, I'm never going to get to hear unless they decide to come back when this is all over. And it's no different to me than when we lost jobs due to an economic crash, as opposed to people just saying, well, if I can't be around my coworkers, I won't continue doing this. So anyway, that's a really long-winded answer, but sorry.
Oh, it's great. I want to give the panel an opportunity to respond should they wish. Anyone?
I know for myself, I was born in '98. Just gonna put my age out there now. 22 over here. So I've always noticed that I'm not a direct middle fit with any particular generation. It's more of like, I'm in this age group, and it's also made me realize that generations are relative. So yes, I'm right on the cusp, right between two different generations that I don't really fit into. So it's more of like people my age. So I don't really have much of a response. It's just more of like, I agree that, you know, in my experience, I've never really attached myself to the term generation. It's more of just these young people in the office, these older people working. So that's something that I try to push, that, you know, generation is really just a relative term to some people, and it's not always labeling. And, you know, that's just something I've been trying to do more of.
Alexander, I'm picking on you last for this round of questions and panels. How do you think a workspace would operate if it only incorporated people from your generation?
First of all, unmute myself. That might be helpful. When you were asking Jake a similar question, I was thinking, like, all of the, if you look at the desktops of all the old people, they're so full of crap. I mean, there's so much stuff on it. And if you look at all the younger people's desks, there's nothing on it. They're like so light and so nimble. I mean, that's like something that I sort of like noticed. Then I mentally went through my office, and it's sort of almost true. Like everybody who's been in it for like 25 plus years, they have all this crap on their desk. I mean, of course, there's family pictures and all this stuff, yes, but there's just a lot of weight, and I enjoy the nimbleness and the lightness, so like of the youth, and which brings me to another point that I was thinking about making or wondering about earlier, is that I think that the older I get, the more I realize that, like when I got into the profession, it was just like the old people knew everything, I knew nothing. And I was supposed to learn from all the old people. And I had to ask lots of questions, and sometimes you got the answers, sometimes you don't. I think nowadays it's like reverse. It's like everybody needs to learn from everybody else. And it's kind of like age, sort of like this. I wish that age disappears. Maybe it's because I'm getting older, but also I mean, the older generations have to learn so much, or can learn so much from the younger generations, that if we would just get over the whole age thing, we would all be, benefiting from each other so much stronger. So those were the 2 points. And now I did the same thing that Marty just did. I forgot your question. So what was your question again?
Okay. How do you think a workspace or a workplace would operate if it only included people from the older generation or the baby boomer generation?
It wouldn't be able to hold up or to keep up. I mean, there was this IT guy from ZGF a couple of months ago, and ZGF is now hiring like information specialists, like people who know how to rake and fleece through information that is more and more out there, with like where we're carrying our phones or where we're driving and whatnot. And I think there's so much more information out there that if you would try to run a business with just people, let's say, that are over 50, who are not really that facile at getting to that information, I think they would fall behind very, very quickly, and would also, even 55. I mean, they would lose track of what the opportunities are that are sort of like coming up on an almost like weekly, monthly, daily basis. I think they would go out of business pretty quickly. So I think youth is important, if it's not the most important thing, but I think it's important if it's coupled with experience. And we may not necessarily have, I mean, we have the same access to all the knowledge than everybody else, but I think what the older generation brings is we have seen all the things that don't work and that fail. Like, we don't have to go down a path anymore that took us like half a year to go, and then we ended up in a wall and we had to turn around and come back. Like, we can just say to somebody, hey, don't do that, because it's not gonna work. Try something else. Like, I don't know what it is, but that one path that might have been in somebody's mind may not be the right solution. So yeah, I don't think a single generational office, if it's all old people, would be very successful, to be honest.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
So for one thing, if you could just imagine for a moment an office full of 22-year-olds, like just completely running it and everything. I mean, it's definitely possible, but just imagine a whole industry. It would work for a while, but I'm just going to move on from that. But we definitely have a lot to learn, and I say we with the broadest umbrella, like the biggest umbrella possible, because I'm not speaking for every single person. But I know for myself, I have so much to learn just from even one person, but just generalizing a whole generation. I have a lot to learn. I'm going to admit that. So I think that seeing, let's see, how do I put this? I think seeing between a younger generation and an older generation, having an office with just older generation people, older people, is not sustainable. So really, architecture and these industries need people like us to come in and kind of fill these gaps as people retire. So in an office, you definitely need both generations because they really, and again, generation, but they really balance each other out because these younger people are going to come in and hopefully be grown to take their jobs. And so it's something that is really valuable to me. It's something that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to stay at one place and learn as much as I can because I recognize that there's so much to learn. But if it were just an office full of 22-year-olds, like just imagine it, it would require a lot more collaboration because as soon as you graduate, you only really have a handful of skills. So a lot more collaboration between people in a broader age range, I think is, a really interesting idea. Where if you just take out all these people who have years and years of experience and just put a group of 25-year-olds together, they'd be working with each other a lot more, which, you just have a group project, then of course that's kind of what you get. But yeah, it would be a really fun thing to do. But again, I appreciate those intergenerational offices much more.
Miranda, can I jump in on here too?
Yeah.
There's some interesting things being said here. I think you're both right on the money, which is that with having grown up at different points in the world and having experienced different things and having grown up with different technologies, we all have very different experiences that are informed by that. And so we have great things to share with one another. Jake will attest to this, and I pretty much just laid it out on the line when I worked with the group of folks that I did at Walsh. I was like, look, I'm a computer idiot. Okay, you guys can show me anything you want. I'm going to be slower than you. But all I want to say is, like, let's get committed to like things like not doing anything except in the digital space anymore. And they're all like, great. And so to some extent, what I would say is I'd like to accomplish this, and I would follow their lead because they'd figure out how to do it. Jake actually did this amazing site visit report that we never would have if I didn't have somebody who had those types of skills and kind of sort of intuition and problem solving. But Alexander said that a group of 53 or 55-year-olds would probably crash a business in no time. While I think that you're going to end up at some of the best solutions just by having the greatest number of ideas to consider. One of the things about people with experience is they have experience. And so probably one of the first things that a person with experience is going to do is look over at the other 53-year-olds and say, like, hey, do you know anything about business? Because I don't. And that person would say, she'd be like, no, I don't know anything about business. I'm an architect. And the 53-year-olds would look at each other and go, let's hire some young person that knows something about business, right? And they would look at all of the other holes that they have and start to figure out that really what we need to do is build a team in order to be able to do this, because we know that's actually what it takes, right? Because we're all taught about the solitary genius in architecture school. I'm sorry, but I don't know any of them, I don't know any of them in practice. This is a collaborative team sport. And I really think that I don't think that people with experience would fail because they have the experience. They'd be able to draw on that, but they'd also be able to draw on the fact, and this is a really important thing to be able to say, I don't know, but I know I need it. And that maybe I don't know anything about AutoCAD drafting, but I know I need somebody like that. I remember saying that back in 1994. right? When actually I didn't want to draft, but I could find somebody who really did want to draft. I knew I needed that. So I think one of the things that experience teaches you is that number one, it's not an individual sport that we're playing here. This is a collaborative effort, and I'd say the other thing, and this goes back to the whole comment that I had about the joy of not having always grown up being connected to a device, is that and probably anybody who gets to like 35 or 40 makes the realization on their own. They're like, oh, we're not building buildings. Actually, we're building relationships, right? And it does not matter what business you're in and what facet of the business you're in. It's entirely about building relationships, and that's the only way that you get there. And that's, I think, why I think it's really, really critical for us to kind of look around at the other people that we have around us, because if ultimately that's what we're doing, then let's not focus on the buildings. Let's focus on the people that we're working with, right? And I always, you can probably ask Jake. He'll let me know, when I was being a technological idiot, just kind of say like, get out of the way and I'll give you a hand. And it was just like, all right, do it. I think experience tells you to just recognize your own limitations, your own holes in your knowledge gap, and figure out where else you can get it.
Thanks, Marty. Michael, did you have a response to that question?
Yeah, you guys, a lot of great ideas, a lot of great thoughts, everyone that spoke before, but from my perspective, I don't think it really makes a difference if everyone was running in, let's even say, a traditional architecture firm, all from the same generation. I don't really think it matters. What I think is more important is the mindset. And what is the mindset of the people in those offices? I really appreciate what Martin was just saying too. Even if you got an architecture firm and every single person in there is 22 years old, and then they land this very complicated hospital project, and they need some, complicated specifications, they're going to go to Portland CSI and say, help me find the right person and the expertise to make this happen. And, I help the bulk of my work, a big body of the work that I do is helping people pass the architect exam. And I always say, when it comes to passing and becoming a licensed architect and passing these tests, experience is a myth. And people that have a lot of experience, when they pass their exams and say, thanks to my experience, I was able to pass my exams really easy. It feels gratifying to say that, but as a person who lives in that world and watches people passing exams all the time, yeah, experience will help, but working really hard and having a good work ethic and a mindset, that's actually that's more important in the ability to focus and get shit done. That's more valuable than having all the expertise in the world. I like what Martin said too, like I'm a small business owner. I got 2 full-time employees. I've grown my business tremendously over the past couple of years, and especially during this pandemic. And I've got a fantastic bookkeeper, an accountant, a lawyer, a video guy. I have a whole army of consultants and people that support me. And I always say that, my job is to make the money. That's it. I just want to make the art and I want to make the money, and the support's really easy to kind of find it as you need it. So those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Michael. Like Sharice mentioned in the chat, mentorship is not only top down. I think there's a lot that the top can learn from the bottom as well. So it kind of fits right in with everything you guys have said, and also fits in with that point of, the transfer of knowledge is critical in job retention, obviously. So to kind of sort of change directions, Sharice, what would you say you want most out of your career at this point versus what you wanted most when you were beginning your career, whether that be longevity, prestige, recognition, money, or anything?
Well, that's a crazy question for me, because when I got my first job at 20 years old in an architecture firm, number one, I had no idea what a spec writer was. And number two, there's no way in hell that's what I was going to be doing for a living for the rest of my life. I was going to be a writer for Time Magazine and travel all over the world writing human interest stories. And I still might do that. But, you know, once I actually got into the business when I was younger, it was very much, part of it was just, I want to learn. I want to learn every single thing. Anybody who will give me 5 minutes will teach me, which was one of the most valuable things I ever did in my career, because it didn't, one of the biggest mistakes we make in this business, like Marty said, this is a team sport. And we all forget that each and every day. And we get in our little bubble, hyper-focused on whatever our little thing is, and we miss out on all this stuff going on around us that is teaching us crazy things. I learned about contracts. I learned about marketing. I'm construction administration. I jumped into every pool they would let me jump into, which has been a gold mine for me later in my career. So for me, it was very much when I was younger about learning and advancing in my career into positions of more responsibility. Now it's a completely different animal. For me, at this point in my career, it's less about my personal trajectory as far as like position or title or money. And it's more about crafting an environment where I find some kind of joy in my work every single day. Marty also mentioned that one of the things, you know, and again, these are broad generalizations, but one of the things that I think at least half of Gen X is pretty damn good at is finding that balance in our lives. We were brought up to put our nose to the grindstone, work 60 or 70-hour weeks, but we were also, you know, I mean, I was a young girl, but like in the 70s and, you know, peace, love, and happiness. And we've had a lot of influences over the course of our lives. And so for me now, I need a job that fulfills me, regardless of the paycheck or the title, because spec writing isn't the most riveting profession on the planet. But you would be amazed that if you change your mindset and you get out of your box and get to know the contractors and the engineers and the product reps and whoever, and figure out how they work. And all of a sudden there's this challenge. I love a good challenge. Give me a good challenge any day of the week and I'm the happiest girl on the planet. And this challenge of bringing all these pieces and parts and people together to try to get this project done. I fall down every single day. And that's okay. That's a part of learning and growing, a lifetime learner, but I need to enjoy my work. So at this point in my career, it's about how can I help people? That's what lights my fire. How can I help people? And how can I make this more efficient? And how can I do this thing that so many people older than me, unfortunately, is where I usually heard this, say, that's never going to change. I mean, anybody on this call who knows me or has been around me knows that there are certain comments that I will kick your ass about. And I don't care who you are or where I encounter you. This has always been this way. Things are never going to change. We don't have time for that. Let me tell you, you don't have 10 times as much time during construction to deal with the shit you don't have time to look at right now. So that's where my joy comes from these days, is basically, whose ass can I go kick today? In a positive way. How can I raise this higher, even if it's just one person? So my goals are definitely, I don't know, about 1,000,000% different than they were when I was 20. But I have a lot more fun these days than I ever did when I was 20.
Thanks, Sharice.
Anytime.
Jake, I know, I email you way too much. Jake, being on that cusp of the 10 years, you know, emerging versus seasoned, as your self-proclaimed exennial, would you say that you kind of fall along those same lines, or how have your career goals and desires shifted from when you first began to where you are now?
I've had the fortune of being able to work with and I'm not just saying this because Marty's on the call, but I've had the good fortune of being able to work with a lot of real good experts in their field and learn from some of the best minds in various fields over the course of my career and my education. And what I found is that if I'm not doing that, if I'm not challenged, but also challenging people who are very well versed in what they're educating us in or practicing, then I'm not interested. And I have no desire to just do something ho-hum or just get a paycheck. You know, that when I fall into that habit, I can only probably last, well, 2 years at a job in various states. And then all of a sudden it's kind of like, what else is over on the, oh, the grass is greener pretty much anywhere but here. And, you know, that's for me. And I actually hope that I hope that I keep that mentality from, you know, 5 years in to 50 years in, or whatever that may be, to say that, you know, you always want to work hard to find the best experts, the best people in what they're doing, the people who aren't bullshitting you, who are willing to say, I don't know, but I do know this very well, and then argue with you into the wee hours about whether your approach or their approach is best, so that you can improve. As I was once told, rising tide raises all boats. And I think that that mentality, that said, I want to get paid to do it too. That's important. If you do anything well, don't do it for free. That's an important mantra, because if you do a bunch of stuff for free, you're not actually necessarily, in my opinion, doing the best you could be doing, because you're not valuing what you do to the level you probably ought to. You're not making that opportunity cost with your time and your effort versus your joy, which I think helps you reach that work-life balance that I don't think any generation has said, I don't want that. I think they've all sort of maybe had priorities that they chose, and whether they chose them or had them thrust upon them, they had those priorities and they picked them, for better or worse. But I don't think anybody goes into a job and says, nah, I don't want that balance shit. I'd rather just work myself to the bone and, you know, make a whole bunch of money and have no friends or family. That's what I want to do. I just don't think that's a choice or decision anybody's ever made. I think it's something other people paint on certain people's perspective. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
I think so.
Okay.
Caitlin, being one on the younger side of the panel, what would you say are some of the most common misconceptions that people have about younger people in the workforce?
I hate to go back to the technology thing, but it's that, you know, assumption that we don't want to learn because we just have all of this information right at our fingertips. As Charisse was speaking earlier, like everything she was saying and describing it, what she did when she was younger, I was like, that's me. That's me. Where I'm just taking every opportunity I can get to just absorb this information. Like 2 months after I graduated, I jumped right into the CDT, and I worked really hard on it, and I passed on my first try, and I was really proud of myself. And now today I bought the CCCA project guide. So I'm just like constantly going, and I know that there's still like real life experiences that I need to get, but this has, you know, with COVID, it's really limited the hands-on learning that I can be doing. So with that, I am using the internet and using my resources to learn as much as I can. But, you know, with my job and, you know, with the industry, sometimes I feel like I'm just not having that much fun. Like it feels like I'm getting busy work. It feels like I'm not doing the creative outlets that I was able to have when I was in undergrad. So sometimes it just feels like bottom of the barrel. I don't feel great about what I'm doing. But that pushes me so much harder because I'm taking my time and my energies to then understand that it's just because I don't understand what I'm doing. I need to learn more so that I can move up. And it's not even a matter of moving up. It's just a matter of I don't appreciate what I'm doing. And so I think that's just something that, I am trying to learn, we are trying to learn. And when we graduate, we don't know everything in a snap. It takes time. So, as soon as we graduate, the biggest misconception is that we're ready to jump into the workforce, that we've learned everything in school. No, we haven't, I promise you. Everything is different. So it's just a matter of we're not lazy. We don't have all this information just off the top of our heads. A lot of us are willing to put in the time, put in the effort, and we just really need a chance to find a great mentor that's willing to work with us, because a lot of us, we're going to be here for the long haul. We are the future of the industry. And so we really appreciate anyone who is able to reach out to us and share their experiences, share more about the industry, because it takes time. We don't know everything, but we are so willing to learn and jump in.
Thanks, Caitlin. Congrats on your CET and good luck on your next endeavor with the CSI certifications.
Yeah, I don't even know what's coming next. I'm just jumping into everything.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to say one thing to it. It's about knowledge, and it's great to seek that knowledge. But I want to get back to something that Martin said earlier. It's about the connections. I don't know if this is the right word, but basically who you know and how you know them. And coming from Germany, or maybe it's because of who I am, I've always been very aware of like fees, and I don't want to waste time and things like that. And at some point, I don't know, 15 years ago, I'm like, okay, this is stupid. I'm going to start doing what I like to do. And I started visiting all my consultants instead of just talking to them on the phone. I would actually show up at my structural engineer's office and talk to them in an office or at their desk for 15 minutes. And then I had seen their environment, and I could go back to my own office, and maybe I wasted an hour. But out of starting to do that and having created like these many relationships, and also all these places that I've seen over the years, I think the knowledge sort of like starts to, I don't know, starts sticking to people, like certain project experiences. And so it's not just doing what's in front of you, but also sort of being willing to, sounds weird, but listen to your heart and follow your own curiosity. And I'm somebody, I don't like offices. I think they're like, I don't like to work in a box all day long. So I just have to move around all the time. And I'm constantly walking up and down, and I'm the guy who's moving, right? And eventually I left the office and started going other places. So that creates those connections that Martin was mentioning. So I think that's an important piece. And I don't necessarily see many people do that, but I think it's helpful. So anyway, sorry, Miranda, you were trying to ask something.
No, it's okay. I was going to ask you, which I think you may have kind of just covered, was how do you think we can combat those misconceptions about the younger individuals in the office to, as a team, to face the future of the industry more effectively?
Yeah. I mean, like you said, meet each other, like go out, do the CSI thing. I mean, the CSI is sort of like I mean, one of our main things is to bring people together, and that's what we're trying to do. And of course, right now we're like stuck at our own houses, right? And looking at these video screens, but it's so valuable, and you learn so many things. And I don't know how many hundreds of examples I have where I have overheard something, and then 3 days later, I'm like, oh, didn't I just hear somebody else talk about blah, 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 blah. And then I call that person, and there's the expert suddenly of something that would have taken me days to figure out. And it's just like these like the older I get, I think the more I realize that the true value of things is sort of like in the little corners and in the little niches. It's not the big thing that's in front of you, but it's like the little decoration is the wrong word, but the little pieces that are around the big things. And so I think like opening your gaze and again, going out there and meeting lots of people is, I think, would be a good way to advance.
I would agree. Thanks, Alexander.
Hey, Miranda,
Yeah.
you're talking about, if I may, you were asking about how to kind of make those lines disappear. In my experience, the way you make those lines disappear is that you agree on and focus on a common goal, and you figure out exactly what everybody can contribute to it. And you really clearly define where it is we're going and what everybody's going to be doing to get us there, because I can't do it all and I don't know it all. I need this team around me to basically accomplish this thing. Once you got that, you've not only got a team focus, but you've got like a specific goal that you're working towards. And the only thing that really kind of matters at that point is like, how can we support each other to get there? You're not worried about who it is or how old they are or why they're here, any of that stuff. Everybody's already committed to, okay, this is our singular focus here and this is what we're going to do. And the only way we're going to solve this is as a team. Might make sense.
Well, you also pretty much answered my next question, which was again directed at you, Marty. You guys don't even need me. I was going to ask, how do you think the experienced generations can best support younger generations? But I think you've kind of answered that almost for both of us, unless you have anything else to add.
You know, I have to say, it was really starting at Meyer Group. I got old really early, apparently, because when I started at Meyer Group in 2005, it was an odd place to work, and I met some good people there. But they kept just giving me recent college graduates, and they're like, "Why aren't you guys more productive? Why aren't your teams more productive?" And I'm like, "My teams are pretty productive, but you know, you have to understand. I'm making sure that they understand as they draw things that a 2x4 is not actually 2x4." And they're like, "What do you mean they don't know a 2x4 is not a 2x4?" I'm like, "They don't teach that in architecture school." Okay, so like when the men and women that work with me are drawing, I want to make sure that they're drawing things that, you know, the contractor is going to look at and go, "Oh, this person knows what they're doing." And that was kind of the beginning of actually loving the idea of teaching and passing things on. And figuring out that actually the responsibility that you get once you have some experience is really to figure out how to transport that into the next group. And the only bummer is we don't have Vulcan mind melts, right? We don't have like data transfers between one another. But I will say that is and continues to this day. It really started at Meyer Group. Probably one of the most rewarding parts of what I do. You know, at Walsh, we had this position there, which they don't have a degree program for. They don't have a course you could take 6 weeks and get good at this stuff. And so what was really awesome was to figure out like, okay, I know this much and I'm effective at, you know, applying that kind of knowledge. How do I get a person from, you know, having like very, very introductory and low level knowledge, 100 level knowledge to the point of this, and you create a path. And that's, you know, for me, that's the common goal between myself and an individual or between myself and a team is like, let's get you there to the point where you don't have to ask me anything. You're just sailing and people are going, I'm going to go deal with so-and-so. I don't need you. It is still to this day, the most rewarding part of being involved in the industry. I'll tell you a story, and it was really, it really hit home for me. Joe Stiebrick, who some of you may know, he's kind of one of the best known people in building science in North America, actually in the world. And you know, Joe's Joe. If you've ever seen him, he's big and he's out there and all that kind of stuff. And And a couple of years ago, he came into town and we had an opportunity to sit down. He said, you know, I kind of feel like right now, my job is actually to figure out how to make the next generation succeed. I need to pass on everything that I know, because he's like, old guys, and if you ever listen to him, he's like, old guys know stuff. And we need to take that stuff that old guys and old men and women know, and we need to, like, it's important. It's really, really important to pass it on, because that's where, and there's this little thing going on in the chat where we're talking about the difference between information and knowledge. And the thing that you have in your hand is access to information. The thing that you don't have is access to knowledge. And I think the way that you get that is knowledge is imbued, it's information imbued with experience. And I think really it's an obligation, and it's a treat, I think. It's a real treat when you see that you've shared information with somebody and then the light bulb goes off. And you're just like, oh man, because really what that's about. And I got to say, this is the other big responsibility, and it's also a huge gift, is identifying and kindling and tending a fire. And I think that's what you want to do with you know, people around you, is you want to kind of want to go like, what's the thing that just like totally turns this person on about what we're doing? And how can we like just keep like putting a little bit more fuel in there so that they just keep getting more and more excited about what it is they're doing? I mean, I think those are the things that are actually, those are the most rewarding parts of doing, like being involved in the industry at this point. I hope that addressed your question.
That was amazing. I know I really appreciate that as someone who's, you know, just starting out in their career, and it's people like that who really make it exciting to be a part of the industry, and any industry. I don't think it's specific to building, but I really respect those.
And I think the other thing about helping to ignite somebody's passion is showing that you have passion yourself. You know, to an extent, what you're doing as you're passing things on is also modeling certain behaviors for folks. I don't say I'm good at it, but it's actually something that's really kind of key for other people to see, is that you're passionate.
Awesome. Jumping into our final question before we open it up to Q&A. And this question is not going to be directed at anyone in particular. Whoever's got something to say, jump on it. What's the question you're most tired of hearing on this subject? And what would you like to say about it so that you never have to answer that question again?
You know, I'm just going to go first. Take Cherie's spot, because otherwise she goes. She's used to it. You know, I saw that question before, and honestly, my reaction was, I'm not tired of any question. And if it keeps on coming up, we haven't answered it right. And so if it keeps on returning, we just have to sit back down and take it apart again and answer the bits and pieces. And if the question stops coming, then we have done our job. If it keeps coming, we still have something to do. So that's my opinion. I don't think that question exists.
Can I go second?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's for me, and I actually kind of looked at these questions and did a little homework for the first time in my life, or for the first time recently. For me, it's not a question that I hear so much as an attitude. The two things that I see in people who are, again, generalizing a little, because I know some really passionate people that aren't like this, but the broader view of people who are older in the way that, you know, they talk about or interact with younger professionals is this kind of two-pronged thing of an attitude towards emerging professionals that they have to go through the exact same paces that we went through in our careers in order to get to a certain place. I hear that a lot. Well, they need to spend this much time on the boards, or they need to do this, or they need to do that. And I'm like, that's crap. They're living and have been raised in a completely different world than we have, with different different resources and different relationships and different communication. And so having this kind of tunnel vision of you can't move until you've done this for 10 years, that drives me insane. You know, it's definitely so much more about who that person is and how passionate they are, how good are they at problem solving. If they're moving ahead of that way sooner, which I'm seeing all the time, there shouldn't be that kind of parameters on a person's rise through the business, regardless of your discipline. And the other one is by some people, and I say the same thing about parenting, the dumbing down of our young professionals. Well, they're 22 years old, so this is all that they know. And talking to them, like talking down to them, or, you know, treating them somehow as like they're less than, because they're being more focused on how old they are rather than what they're able to do and how willing they are to learn and what their work ethic is like or whatever. And those are the two things that drive me absolutely insane in the industry. Don't dumb down anybody. You shouldn't do that to anybody. You know, it's like having a baby and talking to them in baby talk. It drives me crazy when people do that too. Oh, you're a cute little baby. Everybody around us, whether they're babies, whether they're young professionals, whether they're older than me, we learn by what we see and hear around us. And we learn by example. And I think a good chunk of us who are older could be better examples and be more inclusive and empowering. Instead of, if I hear one more person, I teach a CDT, I hear somebody will ask me a question. You know, I'll ask a question in the class and get 20 different answers. Okay, that's a problem right there. Just in our industry not being on the same page about how things are supposed to work. But somebody will ask me something and I'll ask them, how did you deal with that at work? Did you go to your superior or whoever and ask that question? No, I was afraid. Or I didn't want them to think that it was a stupid question. Or if we're creating an environment that anybody coming up behind us or anybody trying to learn, even if they're our same age, is afraid to grow by asking a question because they think I'm going to think it's stupid just because I have more experience, we've got a problem. So that's what really, when I see those attitudes wherever I'm wandering around to, or those mindsets, that I don't think that anything sets me on fire faster.
And actually to pile on that, if you're new to an office and you see like one or two people who keep on having visitors, those are the people that matter. They may not be the principals, but those are the ones that everybody else is comfortable asking questions to. And that's why they barely get their work done. But I mean, it's kind of like, that's like, follow that, because I've experienced that being a good thing. And I strive to be one of those persons, so.
So I was just typing this in the chat, but I realized I'd much rather say it. With Sharice's point about, asking questions, I was just about to shoot out that I got the internship that turned into a full-time job. I got that by first meeting Gaines Group in a office tour. I was with about 15, 20 other classmates. And we did a tour of the office. And I went in there. I heard everything about what their firm does, what the firm values are, what the industry is like in a professional setting. And I asked questions. I raised my hand and was just, asking questions, not even trying to prove myself, just genuinely curious. I wanted to know more about what this industry was like, how it differed in a professional setting. And at the end of the tour, I went up to one of the project managers and said, by chance, are y'all looking for interns? I really like what y'all do here. My name is Caitlin. Can I have a business card or something and reach out to you sometime? She gave me her card. And 2 months later, I had a full-time internship And 2.5, almost 3 years later, because it'll be 3 years in May, I've been working there. And so literally I can point to the exact moment that changed and shaped my future career just by asking a series of questions from one trip. And so that also goes back to those in the professional settings. You need to open your doors to those that are still in college, those that are even still in high school that don't know what they want to do yet, because you can inspire a whole generation of people, because that's what happened to me. I just met a couple of people, asked a couple questions, and I try to be the most loyal employee that I can be, because I recognize I haven't learned everything I can from these people. And that's what I'm trying to do. So again, I'm turning it back on older generations. Open your doors to those that haven't even graduated yet, who don't know what they want to do. Because if they suddenly graduate and they go into the workforce and they're like, I really don't like architecture, no one's helping me, I don't know if this is right for me. Thankfully, I learned early on that this is what I want to do. And there have been other people that have come through the doors that said, I don't like this, I'm out. And that's totally fine. But thankfully, they're in their 20s and not in their 30s. And some of them are in high school and even middle school. We've had interns from like 7th and 8th grade, and even from the technical center right down the road. So it's definitely a matter of just open your doors and give them a chance, because that's literally what happened with me. And I can't tell you how much it's changed my life. So even just, I mean, I know all the time I try to jump my career 10 years, 20 years. Like I'm on this Zoom call because I've been trying to set myself apart. And, you know, what can I do to further my career, when in actuality, I'm not enjoying what I already have. So like I said, it's just a matter of, you know, asking questions and getting involved with everything that you're doing, because that's something that I've been trying to do. I've been saying yes to everything and gotten burned out a couple times, but I've learned from that. I've learned what I like and what I don't like, and I'm learning. So yeah, that's really just my passion moment of like really open your doors and inspire these younger generations.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off of Caitlin. I think the biggest problem with young people in the industry is they don't have experience, and you know, we don't have to pay them a whole lot, but they need to be trained. And for the law, and when it gets back to the what's that one question, I think it's just asking the question, how do I help? And not actively taking action. One of the things that I preach all the time and is telling people, you know, don't listen to what they say, focus on what they do, focus on the actions. And it was a couple of years ago, and Charisse put me up on a panel at the Construct Show. I think it was in Providence. And we were talking about having very similar conversations as tonight. And it was a really powerful moment. There was a young man that stood up and he told this story. He said, I work in one of the best firms in my city. We have work on all these great projects. We've got all these AIA people. We're recognized as one of the biggest industries, you know, leaders for emerging professionals. They pay for my exams. They do all of this stuff, except they work me like a dog. And by the end of the week, after I worked a 55-hour week, there was no way in hell I could pass my exams, but I did it anyway, and I fought through it. And the biggest mistake I made, he said, was that I had my yearly review 3 months before I became a licensed architect. And I got my license, and they said, and I asked for a raise, and they said, well, we just had your review. You got to wait until your next review comes around. And so he went straight to his firm's biggest competitor and sent a resume and got offered a $10,000 raise and turned in his 2 weeks. And then, you know, the emergency brake got pulled and the company said, whoa, wait a minute. And it was like, what the hell's happening? I think I see it a lot of the times, you know, helping emerging professionals is like a buzzword. Remember in early 2000s when sustainability was the buzzword and it just got cycled into all this stuff and no one really knew what it meant, but as many times as you said it, it was important. And I see a lot of that happening. And when it comes to really, I think if you're asking the question, you're missing the mark. I think pumping resources into it and not just throwing money at the problem. I think sharing your time, sharing your knowledge, sharing your wisdom is really, I think, the answer to it, and making that a core part of your legacy as an older person moving through the profession.
That actually goes with one of the questions that we saw that you had sent out to us. And it was, how do you see the industry changing in 15, 10, 5 years, or even 20 years? And I definitely know that the pandemic has, changed everything really quickly. It's not often that just one event can really even change a whole lifestyle and change a whole design style. Like, I love anthropology, and so I've been diving into just exactly how this pandemic has changed the way we live our life, even if it's just subconsciously, we don't even realize that we've changed these habits. But that buzzword of sustainability, when I was in high school, I went to Massanutten Technical Center specifically for architecture and interior design. And that was just the biggest buzzword. We were learning as much as we could about it, about green energy and green design, things like that. Everything was green. And it definitely pulled me into the industry, because it's like, wow, this industry can change the planet. We are the future of humanity. I mean, that was a really empowering idea of, like, if you go into architecture to change the world, really, that's what you're doing. Like, that's how it was kind of portrayed to us. And even now, I mean, if you just look at the relationship between communities and architecture, you can still see that architecture is kind of the unsung hero in a lot of things. But once I got into architecture, I started to see more of, like, the terminology change. And so now it's a lot of these emerging professional, young professional, helping the younger generations. And I'm so grateful to be in a office that really values education, and it's really just a perfect fit, because, like I said, if you haven't caught on, I like learning. I'm trying to learn as much as I can, and so I really value that. But like, I started an Instagram page called Emerge Construction, and it's for the Central Virginia CSI chapter, for us to share events, share my experiences as an emerging professional. But when I started that, literally the bio says, where are all the young people? Like, in the industry, everyone's graduated, but you don't really see where they go. Like, sometimes they go to grad school, sometimes they take gap years. But I really wonder kind of, where is everyone going? And so that's why I think it's a big responsibility. And again, it's why I started the Instagram page, to try to figure out, where are the gaps? And so, like I said, I'm really grateful that I have a job that's valued education, but there's some other firms that they offer these really big, we want you to grow, we want you to learn, we want to do these things, you're valuable. And then the recent graduates, the new architects, go into this blindly, and they just get burned out and fall through. And so that's why I think kind of revitalizing, it really just starts, I don't even know where it would start. It's just a matter of changing our mindset that things like that aren't okay, that you're valued. And, it's one of those buzzwords that I hope just doesn't burn people out, honestly. Sorry, that was kind of a rant. I kind of involved a lot of things in that, but thankfully it's recorded if you want to go back.
The question was, what was it again? No, just kidding. What was what's the question you don't want to have to answer again? And it's, I'm just going to go ahead and I agree with Alexander. I agree with all of the previous responses, but I'm going to go ahead and say there's a question I don't want to have to answer again. And it's, what are the generational differences in the workplace? I never want to have to answer what are the differences again, necessarily. I would rather talk about what are our similarities? What have we pursued? Both every generation, when each generation turned 25, I guarantee they were pursuing more of the similar things than different things. And when they turn 45, they'll still probably be pursuing very many similar things rather than different things. So that's the question I don't want to have to answer ever again. Or what are the generational differences? Because I honestly think, and there are articles out there that would probably say this better than my rant, but the differences highlight the differences. They force us to think about what's different about us rather than what's similar. And that goes beyond generations. That goes, you know, with the advent, which it shouldn't be the advent of, and it isn't really, but the Jedi mentality, the justice, equity, diversity and inclusion, or the DIE, or whatever the buzz acronym is at the moment. But those are all things that you don't want to focus primarily on the differences. You want to start at the similarities, and then you want to acknowledge that there are endemic differences that have to be addressed. Those are not things to be avoided, but they are not places to start with in order to build community, in my opinion. So that's
fantastic point.
That's the question I don't want to answer anymore.
Are there any questions from the audience while we have a little bit of time left?
Can I just say that you got the most progressive, seasoned people out there and some of the most motivated young professionals in the world. So you guys are all a representation of what's going to make this industry grow and better. So kudos to all of you for doing what you're doing and being a great example. Thanks.
Thank you, Melody. We do have one question that popped up in the chat box. It says from Sophia, why does it seem that no company does transitions properly? Management.
How long does anybody have here? And maybe we should define the question a little more narrowly.
She went on to explain management transitions and project transitions, or.
Can I jump in here on this one? And I'm gonna admit a bias towards architects in the way that I respond to this. How many architects took business classes during architecture school? Actually, the better question is, okay, you're a unicorn, Alexander. The better question is, how many people out there had business classes as part of their curriculum as an architect? And the reality is none of us did in the architecture world. It's not where they focus. I mean, you focus on the solitary genius. So, and you focus on a bunch of other things. You also focus on like being a generalist and learning to know a lot or a little about a lot of different things. And generally speaking, like business is not one of them because it's not very attractive to architects, right? But the reality is, in the same way that, you know, what we're actually doing is building relationships, we don't work because like that's the be all and end all of our existence. One of the reasons that we work is to put food on the table. And you have to be able to run a decent business to be able to do that. And so the reason why I think, especially in the architecture community, there is such a poor handoff on a project basis and then on a transition basis is because you have to understand how those things work. And the way that you learn that stuff is by studying how people do those things. and how transitions are made and how you make strategic planning decisions. And I don't think that's what architects have been taught. And, you know, it's really wild going from architecture into construction. Like, you could see from the very get-go, every single one of those people that went through a construction engineering management program, they knew what the game was. It's a business. They have to run it like a business. They have to make money. There's a reason why, you know, contractors give architects quotes for a specific project, but you'd never get a quote from an architect, right? Because they can't afford them. They don't know how to do the business part particularly well. I will say, and transitions are really, really, really hard because all of the people involved in the transition actually need to agree that that's what's happening and how it needs to happen. And I would say that generally speaking, if the transition process is not clearly defined and there isn't a process to it, and there isn't like, who is the clear person that's leading this thing, it's really hard, really, really hard to make transitions work well. I'll admit, I mean, I saw that that a couple different companies that I've worked at, they have a hard time. You know, here's the thing, it's, you imagine, what we do as an industry in general is we plan things. We make magic prognostications about physical entities that have yet to come into being. We make buildings, right? But it's all like magical and fantasy. But what we do is we actually plug away and we look at the very end of where we're going and we create a path. We follow a path and we've got a plan for it. And I don't think in business strategies, we do that nearly as well. Like as designers, as architects, that's not how we're set up. We're set up to look at that one particular project or that one specific goal. And I don't think we look at business practices as being the same sort of thing as architectural practices. And the reality is, without the business practice, the architectural practice doesn't work. I'll turn over the soapbox to somebody else.
I'll just add my 2 cents. I fancy myself a casual neuroscientist, and I'm studying various things and reading a lot about it. But something they talk about is the energy it takes to change your attention. So if you think you are multitasking, there's no such thing actually. But and they can do this now, which they couldn't do when I was in college studying this for real. They can actually measure the energy it takes for a brain to change attention, and it's massive. So when you think about those transitions, when you're transitioning your focus in your own brain being a massive energetic enterprise that exhausts you over the course of a few hours or even a few 15-minute intervals, think about that for an entire organization. It is a painful, energetic process to get all those people to agree what a transition even looks like, let alone to do it. So those are, it's from I'll even say this in this specific frame, from an organization like CSI at either the national level, the chapter level, or even just on a committee. Making transitions is difficult and painful and takes a lot of energy. Does not mean it's not necessary, and it has to be done well in order to really set yourself up for success. It just means you have to acknowledge how difficult it can be and how much energy you really have to pour into it. But then once it's done, you know, that once you've reset your focus, you can assume that your energy level can go back down again. So anyway.
Any other questions while we have the attention of the panel or comments by the panel?
I'd like to make a comment. I know I started out early, but now I'm on a roll. And you can tell me to shut up, Miranda.
No.
It was interesting as we're talking about folks wanting to like move through the profession and have advancement and different opportunities and all that kind of stuff. And and again, I'm focusing on architecture, but I think the same thing is true, of architecture specifications, construction. Malcolm Gladwell and Outlier talked about this whole idea of like 10,000 hours to become an expert. And I don't think, anybody here who has spent like 2,000 hours would disagree with that, right? They'd all be like, you know what, I'm learning a lot, but there's so much more. I mean, one of the things that's really, really, really cool about getting into a job where there's a vertical learning curve is you start the next day with a longer list of stuff you don't know. And that's awesome. And that's when you know you're on the 10,000 hour plan. And the cool thing about a 10,000 hour plan, and I don't mean to do the math on everybody, but that's, 5 hours of, regular work weeks, 40 hours. 5 hours is a long time. And 5 hours is 5 hours is an eternity for some of us, right? And maybe at 5 hours, you're like, or 5 years, sorry. You're thinking, man, that's just way too long. But one of the other things to think about, the way that they always looked at good architects, is that good architects never got good until mid 40s, 50. And it's because there is it's an extensive level and body of knowledge that you really actually need to learn in order to be really effective. Someone actually said it to me about 2 months ago. And they taught it in a really weird way when they said it to me. And I'm bringing people into the company, and he's like, so what are your rates? And I said, well, these are the rates. And he goes, well, but what do you charge? And I was like, well, I charge the same thing. And he goes, well, you're an idiot. And I'm like, why? And he said, because I can bring in your new guy and you can do in 15 minutes what he can do in 4 hours. And what it really has to do with is the fact that, I just have a ton of experience relative to that other person. And it really points to the fact that, and this is going way back to Sharice's thing. Even if we can figure out a better, more fluid way to help develop people and pass on information, all that kind of stuff, it still takes time. And that's one of the things that I think, hey, I was 21 once. Okay. And I thought my boss was a moron. And, he had his feet up on the table reading the paper the entire time. Like, yeah, I was there at one point where I'm just like, dude, I should be like zooming right along through this thing. And I think one of the things you do realize once you actually spend 10,000 hours doing something is you're like, that was a good 10,000 hours. And I kind of feel like pretty comfortable in what I know now. And this is awesome. And so I think that there's also, it's not a job that you have today. It's a career and it's a life. And if you look at it that way, and you're like, I'm not worried about like in a year having a promotion. I'm looking like way down the road where I'm like, I'm a total expert in this stuff and I had a great time figuring it out. If that's the mindset that you can go into it with, I think that it's a long-term view. And a long-term view takes a little bit of experience, and it takes a little bit of maturity, because you have to, sort of delay the gratification. You have to say to yourself, I'm on a long path. And one day I will be an expert, and one day I will be one of those people that I can pass something on to. But I'm not arguing with Sharice, because I would never want to do that. It's crazy. I'm old enough to know better than that. But what I would say is that you do have to put time in. That is indeed how you develop expertise. Is you got to put the time in.
And I don't disagree with you, Marty, so I'm going to let you live, just so you know. For me, I would like to add one parting thought. I don't care if you're younger or spicy, I mean seasoned, throw out the idea of a mentor. Just toss it. Every single person that's on this call today is a potential mentor for me. Every single person I meet has something to teach me. So get out of your box, get out of your comfort zone in your little circle you feel safe in, go meet everybody and then pick their brains. you will, I definitely agree you have to put in the time. I put in way more time than I wanted to on some things to get there, depending on how the path was going. But the more people you meet, so much you either don't learn in school or you get on the job and you learn it wrong. And you spend, I have people that take my CDT or I do a presentation and they tell me something. They've got 25 years experience and I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Have a seat, let's have a talk, because I don't know who taught you that way back when you were a kid, but you've been doing it wrong for 25 years. Now, I'm not saying I know how to do everything right, because I don't. But I don't speak to the things I don't know what I'm talking about, because, I'm not real fond of looking like an idiot. But the thing is the more people you meet, the more disciplines you get entrenched in. I mean, I don't think you should be allowed to get out of architecture school without doing a 6-month internship in a construction company. Just my personal opinion. But architects don't know how to build anything a lot of the times, which means they design things that can't be built. It's because we don't talk to each other. We stay in our little bubbles where it's safe. Instead of I called Marty once and he was doing a building and closure class for a bunch of college students. And I said, I pretty much don't know diddly squat about the enclosure. Can I come crash your class? He said, come on out. I come out in a dress and a hard hat and run around with a bunch of 18-year-olds learning things I didn't know before. But you know what? I put myself out there and I asked, and so get out of your box and treat every single person you meet as a mentor and have those conversations and connections. And I promise you're going to learn more than you ever even knew was, more than you want to learn. I'll tell you that much, but more than you ever knew was possible. And that's I'm done talking. I'm going to go back to my beer.
I'd like to amplify what Charisse just said. I just gave a keynote about this the other day at the Young Architect Conference, but I think the concept of having a mentor does more damage than it actually helps, because people say, oh, I'm going to find this, I call it the magical genie mentor who's just going to magically guide me through my career. And they wait around and they look for this mentor, and you will never find it. And the reason why you'll never find it is because it already exists and it's right in front of you. And rather than looking for that mentor, I say, mentorship is everywhere. And rather than thinking of it as mentorship, it's knowledge. And that's what you're going after. But people here I got to find a mentor, and they think it's this passive experience, when really mentorship, it's an active experience, and the person being mentored is really the one that has to seek it out. But it's also kind of, I live in the architect exam world. You can give people all the resources and tools and books and support them, but if they aren't willing to, they don't have the right mindset, and they're not really willing to put in the hard work that it takes to be successful, it doesn't mean anything. And so I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to the individual, and do they want to accept and learn and grow from this knowledge? I know this is going to wrap up real soon. I just want to say thank you to everyone else who spoke tonight. You guys are a lot of great insights, and thank you for sharing.
Hey, can I jump onto that, Michael? And Charisse, there's this concept of the reverse mentor, which is you actually find somebody who's 20, 25 years younger than you, and you have them really guide you through all the stuff that you don't know, right? I'll freely admit, there's certain questions I just go to my 20-year-old and I'm like, dude, help me out with this, because I have no idea what's going on here. And I think it's really awesome. And it ends up meaning that he ends up coming and showing me things on his phone, like, hey, do you know how to do this? Or like, hey, what about this? And I'm like, yeah, I don't care about that video. But that whole concept is really kind of cool, because it's an acknowledgement of the fact that, and this is generally true, that younger people are going to be much more open to new experiences, new ideas, new technologies, and probably folks that are in my age group aren't going to be as drawn into that stuff as facile with adopting it. And then there's the other thing, which is just the real awesome reason for keeping people around you. And Caitlin, I loved what you talked about. is they keep asking questions. They keep asking questions. That's the whole reason, because the whole reason that it becomes a really amazing thing when they ask questions, because one of the things you actually have to do in answering the question is actually think about how you know what you know. And then you start to think about, okay, well, now I know what I know in terms of how I'm going to answer that question. How do I make sure that the person I'm answering the question to actually internalizes this and knows what I know now and can move forward with it? And it forces you to understand or think about how you learned so that you can try and figure out how to help somebody else to learn.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Marty. I think we're going to wrap things up. I know we got at least 2 people on our panel specifically who it's reaching about 10 o'clock over there. So I know in your time zone, it's my bedtime, but I just want to thank you all again for volunteering your time to speak and to offer such amazing words of advice and insight on a topic that seems to be ever growing and changing. And thank you to everyone who's been here and listened and taken time out of your day to listen to what everyone's had to say about the subject. So keep an eye on the Portland CSI calendar. I know we have a lot of other great things coming up. Specifically, the Emerging Professionals has a What the Cert event going on end of February, where the National CSI Director of Certifications is going to come break down CSI certifications for us. So thank you all. Have a great night. This will be uploaded on YouTube. And
for the people that are still here, if you're willing, if you could turn on your cameras just so I can take a screenshot and share it on the Emerge Instagram page, and if the Portland CSI chapter wants to share it, so also so I can see everyone's faces and say goodbye. So
you want all the old people off first?
No way.
No.
It's an intergenerational panel. So I'm going to take a quick screenshot. So feel free to smile or frown.
I don't know who the hell you're calling old, Marty.
I was talking about me.
Yeah, I thought so.
All right, it took 4. Oh, we still got people going.
Oh.
Hello. Okay, I'm good. Took 20 screenshots, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Caitlin.
Everyone's smiling faces.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to
Good night,
see everyone.
Have a great
Thanks, everyone.
night.
Thank you.
This is great.
Thank you.